When art restoration goes south. I'll check a few of these out. Oh, I don't want to get
Around
DMCA'd.
1930, directly on the wall by a minor Spanish artist. And after 82 years, it had started to flake significantly from moisture buildup. Meet Cecilia Jimenez, longtime
Cecilia.
parishioner and amateur painter who is upset with the damage the painting has taken. So she decides to try and restore it herself. She gets some way through the restoration and decides to take a holiday and let it dry, then return and finish it. Sometime later, the townsfolk start to take notice of the changes. They aren't pleased. At first, the mayor suspects vandalism,
Whoa!
but then folks eventually find out it was done by a local, Mrs. Jimenez.
Thanks,
Eventually,
Cecilia.
a local newspaper reports on the
That
incident,
looks
and
pretty
that's when
good.
things really get rolling. The news was out, and online communities exploded. Discussion threads, criticism, memes, edits, cartoons, pastries, parodies, a bicycle, cosplays, tattoos, Japanese candy, pixel art, nail painting, stamps, SNL skits, and general hilarity spread far and wide and became an
So,
internet
in a way,
sensation.
she did
The
a
new
much better
painting is
job.
mocked and ridiculed for days on end. Many people call it the worst art restoration ever, and the news travels all around the world. Let's skip forward 6 years. The location is also Spain.
If
This
you said
16th century
stellar.
sculpture of St. George has been aging badly. The wood has darkened and lots of the paint has flaked off. The local parish decides to take matters into their own hands. The result is less than adequate. One of the eyes veers off to the right. The skin is now a cartoonish pink color, and all the subtlety of the original paint job is lost. Even more
I don't think it
upsetting is
looks
the statue is a
that
rare
different.
example of polychrome sculpture, a complex process used to make statues more lifelike. And it gets worse. Experts say that with this amount of overpainting, removing it will also mean the detail and color of the original will be
Just a
lost
stupid
forever.
statue
Apparently,
anyway.
the church hired an arts and crafts teacher to do the job. Let's skip forward 3 months. The location? Spain. Again, a set of 15th century statues was painted
Oh,
in garish
that
colors
looks
by a local
good.
parishioner, with permission from the priest. Of course. I'm not a professional, she states, but I always like to do it, and the figures really needed to be painted. So, you know how to paint, right? Yeah, sure. Back to 2012. The news about the fresco continues to spread. Many comment on the painting's similarity to a monkey. People start to call it Eche Mono. Mrs. Jimenez is interviewed by a news station where she defends herself. But without strong evidence, most of it falls on deaf ears. Now at this point,
What
many
does she
of you may
defend?
be angry at Cecilia Jimenez, and I wouldn't blame you. Some people at the time also had quite vitriolic comments about her, and many thought that this was just an arrogant old woman who had ruined a valuable painting without permission. And yeah, what she did was pretty arrogant. But according to her, she did get permission, and she also claimed that people had watched her working in broad daylight and had not said a word. And apparently,
so she
this
knows
was
it's
also
dog
not
shit.
her first time working on the painting. She recounted that she spent time in an apartment by the church and had touched up the painting repeatedly, specifically on the tunic, with the permission of the parish priest and caretakers. And at some point, she decided it needed a major rework on the face, which was halted after her first stage of brushwork. Now, it would be nice to think that the only reason this looked bad was because it was stopped very early, but the proportions and muddy colors still
I
don't make
think
much
if
sense
she
for
just
a
had another
first
couple
stage.
days,
That's not to say there
it would
isn't
have
a
come out
possibility
incredible.
if she was given more time there could have been a better result, because many parts do look very unfinished, but I don't think it would be able to match the original painting. And even if Mrs. Jimenez had the skills to replicate the work, that's not really the point of a proper restoration. I've watched over 30 hours of Baumgartner restoration, so I'm pretty much an expert. But according to the opinions of these other experts, restoration is only supposed to restore what has been lost, not to overpaint and add on to the artist's original vision. This is also one of the fatal flaws of the restoration of the St. George sculpture. So as soon as Mrs. Jimenez started to go past the flaky areas and eventually completely cover up the face, she should have stopped. And whether the priest actually did give permission or not, we may never truly know.
We could ask
However,
him.
a year later, it was revealed the priest was arrested for alleged
Oh.
sexual abuse and embezzlement of
That sounds about right.
$285,000. The priest's lawyer said the case had nothing to do with the painting incident. You can make of that what you will. Mrs. Jimenez also had a great deal of remorse for what she did once she realized the full extent of her actions. Many reports said she suffered a great deal at the time, refusing to eat, visiting a psychiatrist, just general stress. Picture this. You're an 80-year-old woman, and your favorite local painting is deteriorating, and you think you can restore it a bit. First,
And you
start
do a
with
great
small
fucking
areas,
job.
but eventually you want to fix the whole image. You start painting on the flaking spots, and then you notice this spot is also flaking off, and this spot doesn't look the same, and then this color doesn't quite match, and then the paint starts getting absorbed, and before you know it, you've covered up the whole thing. So maybe you need to take a break and rethink how you're going to approach this. Then over the next 2 weeks, your restoration becomes a worldwide social media sensation. You are ridiculed and laughed at by millions of people. This is an important thing to note. You also have to understand that international backlash for anyone probably does terrible things to their mental health, especially since her mistakes were blown a bit out of proportion. As for claims that this painting was rare and valuable,
and here is what she did to this rare and valuable painting.
Sure, it was old, and the townsfolk did have a sentimental attachment to it, but several sources say it had very little historical significance and wasn't really that valuable. A lot of this can be demonstrated just by the writings about the painter of the original. Elias Garcia Martinez is pretty much only known because of the botched restoration. And it gets better. A few years later, a copy of the painting by the same artist was discovered by 2 antique dealers. It's an earlier work, and is in much better condition.
That doesn't look very good.
So it turns out Cecilia Jimenez's mistake was actually far less significant than most people believe. What's more is that Spain had been going through an economic recession, but with help from the media, the town and the church became quite a tourist attraction. Later, the church reported nearly 200,000 visitors within the last 6 years.
Just to see that?
$57,000 per year from merchandise and tourist fees. Later, an opera based around Jimenez's life was created. It's about as strange as you would expect.
Oh, this is good. This is lit. Wow, I mean, the local church group is crushing it.
Was full of herself. It's not far-fetched to say that she has some pride, but honestly, if you made a mistake that was so hilarious that it became famous, wouldn't you want at least some recognition and a cut of the profits? And these are profits just from tourist visitors and merch sales. She did not go around copyright claiming internet users if anyone was confused. But even from these small sources of revenue, this painting produced a lot of money. Eche Mono turned out to be great at selling merchandise. Pens, t-shirts, mugs, the usual stuff. The money was eventually split between Mrs. Jimenez and the sanctuary's retirement home. Mrs. Jimenez is reportedly using her half to take care of her son, who has cerebral palsy. Jimenez also eventually painted her own version of Jesus for a wine label. Sure, the image might be a bit wonky, but it's stylistically clear. The features are well defined, and I would say it's a big improvement.
I think it's a downgrade.
Inspired wine also exists.
I'll just say it. I think she hit
pretty good,
the peak of her career with
all the new attention. She also opened
piece.
up an art show full of her other paintings that are so much better than what you would expect. Oh, and she also sold one on eBay. The painting is now permanently on display next to a picture of the original version. Some folks took their own interpretive stance on the now famous work. One reporter wrote, "The restoration provides rare, raw access to human faith at work, representing one woman's vision of her savior, uncompromised by schooling." It was unclear whether experts could ever properly restore Eche Homo, but I don't think anyone has the intention of doing so, now that the ruined version is producing more money than the original ever did. So why do botched art restorations like this happen so often? Well, I can't tell you why it seems to be happening so much in Spain, but I can tell you that art, especially old art, is extremely delicate. For a proper restoration, a restorer has to approach each and every artwork as its own problem. What chemicals need to be used, how it should be cleaned, how it should be retouched, where it should be retouched, if it should be retouched. It's quite complicated, and it requires a trained expert to do one properly without causing irreversible damage. Not only are these restorations bad, They also make getting back the original near impossible. One expert says this happens a lot more often than newspapers talk about, and when it comes to really old art, that's just how it is. Over time, it's going to pass
I think we
through a
just
lot of
repaint
hands,
all
and
that
it's going
shit.
to
Fuck
get
it.
damaged and accumulate grime, and eventually someone is going to try and fix it. If it's not in a museum or heavily guarded by someone with a lot of knowledge, it's going to deteriorate by natural processes or human interference. As for the 16th
That was a
century
pretty intense
statue, a
painting.
re-restoration has been completed. And as far as I know...
Wait. Was this not... I didn't notice this the first... Is it over Reptar? Like, what is this horse standing over? A dinosaur? That's fucking awesome. I didn't notice this. I thought it was just a rock. That's not a dragon. What kind of dragon has little baby feet like that? It's more like a T-Rex. Kinda. I guess it could be a dragon. Or just like a giant lizard. Maybe Godzilla or something.
has been completed.
A
And as
real
far as I
one.
know, there has been no further news
True.
on the set of statues.
It has wings? Oh, I didn't even
So,
notice.
what is the lesson in all of this?
Makes it give some Clorox.
Well, if you ever make a mistake, just remember to make that mistake so spectacularly disastrous that you become famous for it. But in all seriousness, please do not go vandalizing art for fame. You are
Too
probably
late.
not going to get the same result. Art impacts us in ways we may not expect. In this case, it was the story of a woman who, in good faith, went in a bit over her head, became the creator of a meme, and in an unlikely turn of events managed to come out on top. Just, in the future, if you plan on doing something to an antique, please just contact an expert first.
Or just ask me if you can do it. I'll tell you.